Section 13.1 continues with discussion of these two graphs where we have on this the top graph, the GDP growth rate on the vertical axis. And on the bottom graph, we have the unemployment rate going from 1875 to 2010. Again, this information is for England. Can we create the same graphs for the United States? Of course we can. We can go back to that Fred data set. And again, we can search for GDP, search for, oh, it looks, my computer keeps changing it to gap instead of GDP. Get the GDP graph. And if we do edit graphs and we say the units, we want the percent change. And so then here we have now that graph of the percent change in GDP each quarter for the United States. Notice the craziness here with the start of COVID of the GDP jumps down and then back up. Now, if you remember from the previous graph, when we're looking at GDP, it doesn't get all the way back up, right? It goes down almost 9% here, and then it has a 7% increase, right? If it went down 8% and then climbed 8%, it would still be below where it was at because the 8% increase is starting from a lower base. 8% to the smaller number is not going to be as much as the 8% of the large number, right? So we're not back to where we were before. Notice that all the periods where GDP goes down for 2 quarters in a row, when the NBER declares a recession, remember these gray areas indicate areas that the NBER has declared as recession. They declared a recession when the GDP goes down for 2 consecutive quarters. They call the end of the recession when the GDP growth returns to being positive. So this graph here, let me actually just take out these last couple, the 2020, right? So you can see now more of the up and down. Notice we're generally positive, right? Over a year, we generally average about a 2.8% growth rate. So in a quarter, that's a little less than 1% growth rate each quarter. So this is comparable to the graph here we have for England. Then down here we have the unemployment rate. And again, we can create this unemployment graph. So unemployment rate. And so this is the graph for the United States for the unemployment rate. We're going to talk in a later video of exactly what is meant by unemployment rate. This is not the number of people that are applying to get unemployment checks from the government. This is people that do not have a job and are looking for a job, right? And so you can see again the craziness of 2020 that the unemployment rate skyrocketed in March and April of 2020, and then it's come back down, but it's still at 6%, right? So it's still incredibly high unemployment rate. And you can see with the recessions that with each recession, the unemployment rate goes up. As the GDP goes down, the number of people that are unemployed goes down. When GDP growth rate is negative, the number of unemployed people go up. We can see this in our charts for England here, right? So we can look at the points where, that this kind of makes a cycle, right? And so you look at the area where there is let me get my pen so I can annotate here. Let me get hold on a second. So right here, right, we have goes down, then up, and then down again, right? That is a business cycle. And so the peak here, that is your business cycle peak. And then at the bottom here, that is your business cycle trowel, right? And so the whole thing is the business cycle. If we continue down, we can see that at the end of World War I, what happened in England at the end of World War I, all the soldiers come home, everyone's like, great job, thank you for your service, you're now unemployed, you don't have a job, right? So everybody comes home from World War I and the unemployment rate just skyrockets, right? And they stop buying all the tanks and the guns and so on. So the government stopping purchasing all that causes a decrease in GDP, right? All the stores that used to be selling tanks and guns, right? They no longer are employing the people to make tanks and guns. And the people that used to have a check because they were soldiers and they could buy things with those checks because they're getting their military pay from the government, right? They no longer can buy things. And so this causes a incredible amount of the GDP collapses in England. It goes down 9%. in a quarter, and the next couple of quarters is, again, it's just continuing to go down. The GDP rate's going down, and so in the unemployment rate, we see the unemployment rate skyrocket after World War One. The United States does not have such a dramatic drop off right after World War One. Instead, ours comes more in the Great Depression, but the Great Depression is not as significant in England as it was in the United States. But you can still see with the Great Depression that you have GDP goes negative, unemployment rate again goes up. For England, it goes up from the already high point from um, the end of World War One. Eventually, with World War Two, it starts to come back down again. So you can then last point here, you can notice here the start of the 2008 global crisis. We see GDP goes down and the unemployment rate in England goes back up. Okay, so when you're looking at these graphs, keep in mind these graphs, you just squiggly lines, and it's easy to they're just numbers, right? We have to remember what we learned in the videos yesterday, right? That when that unemployment rate goes up, that is just incredible cost, right? It's incredible cost to people. People are losing their incomes, they're losing their ability to maintain their payments to keep their houses, right? People are not able to keep the lights on, not their lives collapse. And as we talked about in the previous day's videos, right, this can have incredible impacts on their general well-being, right? And so this comes at when we have these increases in unemployment, right? They come at incredible cost. So anything that we could do, right? One of this has been kind of a depressing start to the class of talking about unemployment and the death of despair. But the reason we talk about this, the reason why we take this class is because in our economics, we can start learning about the policies that can hopefully help create the conditions where we don't have these sustained periods of high unemployment, right? And so hopefully we can find some solutions to that throughout this class. All right, that's it for this.